You're at a party. There are people everywhere. Laughter, music, conversations happening all around you. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, you have never felt more alone in your life. Not the kind of alone that comes from an empty room. Something worse. Something that sits differently. A loneliness that is somehow sharper, heavier, more suffocating when it happens inside a crowd than it ever feels when you're actually by yourself. If you felt this, and most people have, even if they've never said it out loud, you are not strange. You're not broken. You are experiencing one of the most quietly painful and least talked about phenomena in modern human psychology. And the reason it happens is more fascinating and more important than you might think. Let's start with what loneliness actually is, because most people define it wrong. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. You could be completely alone, no one around for miles, and feel perfectly at peace. Content, even happy, and you could be surrounded by 100 people and feel a loneliness so deep it physically hurts. The two things are almost entirely unrelated. Psychologists define loneliness not as a lack of people, but as a perceived gap between the social connection you have and the social connection you need. It is not about quantity. It is about quality. It is about whether the connections around you feel real. And that word, real, is where everything gets complicated. Here is what happens in a crowd. You're surrounded by people, but almost all of those interactions are operating on a surface level. Small talk, pleasantries, the social performance that humans run automatically in group settings, smiling at the right moments, laughing at the right volume, saying the right things about nothing in particular. And some part of you, the deepest, most honest part of you, knows that none of it is touching the real you, the version of you that exists underneath the performance, the part that has actual fears and actual questions and actual things it needs to say. That gap between the surface level interaction happening around you and the genuine connection your brain is actually wired to need. That gap is loneliness. And it is loudest in crowds because crowds are where the gap is most visible. There is a concept in psychology called the intimacy gradient. Think of human connection as existing on a scale. At one end, the deepest end, you have intimate, honest, vulnerable connection, the kind where someone knows the real you and stays anyway. At the other end, you have pure surface interaction, strangers, pleasantries, noise. Most social situations, parties, work events, group chats, social media, exist almost entirely at the shallow end of that scale. And the human brain, which evolved over hundreds of thousands of years specifically to need deep tribal connection, doesn't know how to be satisfied by shallow interaction, no matter how much of it you get. It's like being surrounded by food you can't digest. You're technically not starving, but you're not being fed. Social media made this dramatically worse. For the first time in human history, it became possible to be connected to hundreds or thousands of people simultaneously and feel more isolated than ever. Because what social media provides is almost entirely surface level. Reactions, highlights, curated versions of people's lives designed to be seen, not felt. You scroll through evidence of other people living, and somehow the watching makes the gap feel wider. Everyone appears to be somewhere, with someone, having something, and you are here, on the other side of a screen, watching. Psychologists have a name for this specific feeling. They call it social comparison. And research consistently shows that the more time people spend passively consuming other people's social lives, the lonelier and more inadequate they feel, regardless of how many connections they technically have. But here's what makes this truly interesting. The times you feel least lonely are almost never the times you are surrounded by the most people. They are the times, however brief, when the surface drops away, when someone says something real, when a conversation goes somewhere unexpected and honest, when you stop performing and something genuine passes between two people. Those moments don't require a crowd. They sometimes require the opposite. Being alone, truly alone, without the pressure of performing, gives some people access to themselves in a way that crowded rooms never can. The thoughts, the feelings, the internal landscape that gets buried under social noise. Solitude, for many people, is not the absence of connection. It is a different kind of connection, with the part of themselves they can't access when they're busy performing for others. So what do you do with this? The answer is not to avoid people. Isolation is not the cure for loneliness. In fact, chronic isolation makes it significantly worse. The answer is to get better at seeking depth over breadth. One real conversation over 10 surface ones. One person who knows the actual you over 100 who know your highlights. It means being willing to be the one who goes first, who says something real before the other person has, who drops the performance slightly and risks being seen. Because the painful irony of the crowd paradox is this. Almost everyone in that room is feeling some version of what you're feeling. Almost everyone is performing for an audience that is also performing. Almost everyone is waiting for someone else to make it real. You're not more alone than other people. You're just more honest about the gap. And that gap, that ache for something genuine in a world full of surfaces, is not a flaw. It is the most human thing about you.